Hi, I'm Rev.Jessie Brandon, and I'm a metaphysical minister as well as a life cycle celebrant. And you have dropped in on Epiphanies, where I get to have my two favorite things come together, people and books. So make sure you're settled into your comfy chair, because today we're talking about The Seat of the Soul with Gary Zukav. And boy, I read this, it's got to be 25 years ago, and it was just so juicy then. It's a really great book. And with me today is my guest, Sarah Melody, and she is a certified yoga teacher, singer-songwriter, and previous national spokesperson. Now, Sarah recently opened her own yoga studio here in Barrie called Anahata Yoga from the Heart, that focuses on making yoga affordable for all. And through her own experience with anxiety and depression, she leaned on yoga to get her through it. And through Anahata Yoga, she offers a welcoming space for all, even those struggling with mental health. Sarah combines her love of music and yoga in one. So please help me welcome Sarah Melody.
Thanks, Jessie, for having me.
Thank you so much for making time. I'm glad you made it. So, Seat of the Soul, let's just take a peek at it. It's about the birth of a new species and the explosion of human perception past the five senses. It's about the values of the soul, harmony, cooperation, sharing, and reverence for life. It's about authentic power, the alignment of the personality with the soul. And it's about non-physical guides and teachers. And on that note, I'm going to hand the book to you and ask you why this book.
Well, that's a great question. I think as we get further in our own journey, we're always trying to find that answer. What can help me next? And a friend of mine actually recommended this book, and I thought, no, I've read every self-help book from here to there, and I almost have a, I don't want to use the word addiction, although he uses that word in this book, but I almost have, to a fault, an addiction to always look for the next way to fix myself or to better myself. So I thought, I'm good. I don't need anything else. And then this friend said, no, you should read this book because you're on this new path of something that's more than just a physical experience. So I took the summer to read it. Absolutely loved it. I actually read it on a flight over to Costa Rica and just felt like, I don't know about you, but when you travel, you're always in this just different perspective anyways. So you're already in that different place. And it was just eye-opening that I was on that right path and that we are more than that physical being. There's so much more to us.
Absolutely.
And finding that's harder to connect with people on that level these days. So this book spoke to me. So I think when you read the back of the book, Jessie, at first I'm like, that could be a lot. That could be scary for someone. But as I started to pick up the introduction part and just read about power and how we misuse that word here in our Western society, that's what really connected me to the book. So. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about that. What does he say about power?
So, am I okay to open one of the pages?
Absolutely. You're okay to be you.
I know, that's another thing I have to work on. Stop asking for permission. So one of the things he talks about is money being a symbol of external power. And we're always talking about, if I have X number of dollars, I can do blank with my life. So this connection to money or status, whether it's social status or a job, and I'm having a hard time relating to that, and especially in my world of yoga, where I'm supposed to relax and calm people down, even though I'm quite hyper energetic myself. I find a lot of people asking for power yoga, that they want to work. They always want to work. So when I read this page about that external power, about money or our job or education, our social status, as he writes in here, that's something we fear to lose, as he says. A home, a car, an attractive body, an agile mind, a deep belief is a symbol of external power. What we fear is an increase in our vulnerability. This results from seeing power as external. So I took that as, okay, so I don't know about you, but when I read a book, I kind of relate it to where I'm at in my life right now. And coming from a vinyasa background in yoga, people want to work in yoga. But yoga is really supposed to be meditative. So as I read that, I asked myself, so if I'm popping out this power class, what am I actually promoting then? And using that use of the word power in the wrong way. So power is something external, but it's something we tend to still want or need. So I tried to pull it back and just ask myself, so why do I need that? And he also said, competition for external power lies at the heart of all violence. The secondary gain behind ideological conflicts, such as capitalism versus communism, and religious conflicts, such as Irish Catholic versus Irish Protestants, and geographical conflicts, such as Jew versus Arab, familial and marital conflicts is all external power. So it really changed my perspective on power. And that sense of maybe control, having to have power equals control. And he goes more into that. There's actually a full chapter on that, but that's just the beginning of the book. So that really hit me, that why do we need this form of power all the time, or form of control?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's control can really it can really bind you. And I don't think people that that are non-thinking or unconscious moving towards having control over things don't realize that they're actually limiting themselves from experiencing more. Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah. So why you chose this book? Because it was the next step, and you just read it this summer.
Read it this summer, and then reread a little bit for, as I was joking, restudying before our meeting again. And I actually had to admit that I had that anxiety being a kid again, where, oh my goodness, I have an assignment and it's due tomorrow. So I was like, Jessie, thank you for that. But that excitement again, but also the anxiousness of, how am I going to clearly represent this book? Because it's based on my experience of the book. And my perspective of the book now in the summer might be different perspective when I read it, you know, further on in my life. But the biggest thing was just that understanding of that we are more than that physical being. And another part in the book was personality that really hit home for me. So my previous work was in music, as you know, and it was all about you have to have personality. And it almost came across sometimes as this superficial thing, and finding that fine line of, am I being genuine with my personality, or am I putting on a front because I have to? And that's where this book reminded me that personality doesn't necessarily equal who you are. It matters more about your soul, about how you treat other people, and more importantly, how you treat yourself in this life.
Have you got that marked about personality?
I do. Let's see, out of all the sticky notes, which one I put down. I think it's near the back here. So that was just a big thing for me. And another, you know, there's so many books, as you said, you have like 200 and something books. Another book that stood out for me was The Four Agreements, which I'm sure a lot of your viewers have read. And at that time, one of the things he talks about is believing something that someone's told you to a point of it being gospel. So I think that word personality was a really strong word for me, because in music it was all about, what is your personality? What can you offer? So when 10 years later and I get to read this book and that word is smack dab in my face again about personality is just a physical thing, it's not a soul part.
It's not authentic.
It's not authentic. Yeah, then I started saying, no, you've been on the right track all this time. You have been true to your soul or your own being. And you've just been confusing that, though, with what you're told is you need to have as personality. So will I find the page? I don't know. But yeah, so that was something that kind of stood out for me. The personality part was, okay, maybe I need to be less fixated on that. More fixated on how I'm treating myself. How do I speak to myself, as you said, about affirmations in one of your previous episodes, like, you know, I am, I can, I will. Those are the things I try to remind myself is more important than what personality or persona am I having today.
I was just going to ask you for a synonym to personality so that we could dig a little deeper into that. It's that face that we present that we're either trying to market or trying to be all to whoever we're dealing with. And it's not our true modus operandi, shall we say. It's not who we are when we're either alone or with our friends, when we're actually consciously in touch with our soul. There's a different person that comes out.
Everyone keeps telling me that as I approach 30, which I'm a year from that, now I'm sharing with that with everyone, is that I'll stop caring so much what other people think. And I'm really trying to focus on that now. So if I say something, I'm like, oh, I really shouldn't have said that. I'm just accepting that that's who I am. And I'm allowed to say that, and I'm allowed to speak up, and maybe I didn't use my personality or persona to be mindful of what I said first, but I'm just coming more from that place of heart, that place of soul.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that, because if you say something that is just, it strikes you funny or it strikes you as truth, and you say it without intention to harm, then you're just being you, and that's okay. that doesn't mean that if you end up harming somebody with what you've said, that you don't have, I think, a responsibility to discuss it with them if they're feeling hurt, and at least owning your part in that. But
absolutely, it doesn't give you permission to go around and speaking negative towards people, but you are allowed to speak your truth, and then maybe take a step back. Okay, oh, did I mean that? Okay, because we don't always take that conscious thought before speaking or reacting or responding. We sometimes are like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, and then you're right, taking that time with that person and be like, I think I wasn't clear in what I said. Let me explain that for you. But but also not having to tiptoe all the time about, I can't speak my truth. I can't just be who I need to be. And just let it go. And I found the page.
Oh, great. Good.
Page 30. When a multi-sensory personality looks inside itself, it finds a multitude of different currents. Through experience, it learns to distinguish between these currents and to identify the emotional, physiological, and physical effects of each. It learns from example which currents produce anger, thoughts, and destructive actions, and which currents produce love, healing thoughts, and constructive... Oh, I reread the thing twice. In time, it learns to value and to identify with those currents that generate creativity, healing, and love, and to challenge and release those currents that create negativity, disharmony, and violence. In this way, a personality comes to experience the energy of its soul. So there he goes and talks about how the two actually connect, even though the personality comes across as that physical form, but they do connect to the soul after. And I think for me, and maybe I may have picked the wrong part to share at this part in the book, but for me, it's just a matter of letting go of that front all the time and just listening to what you need, listening to what you need in that moment, or the part of your journey right now. What I wanted to make clear was that I mean, personality is something we have, because the way I look at personality is kind of like people would say, oh, well, she's funny and she's irreverent and she's, she likes to goof on people and that kind of stuff. And so that my personality is fun-loving and that kind of thing. But the way I see him talking about personality there is, again, how you present yourself in the world and who people see. And getting closer to the true personality of your soul is the goal. Right. Would you concur? No, absolutely. I would agree with that. That's another thing I try to say is, back to my own yoga practice, it's more than just the physical part and meeting your mat, taking your practice off your mat, and that comes in play with your personality a little bit, because that's the first thing that people see is your personality in the physical form, and then the second part is that part of your soul, like of treating people the way you want to be treated, as everyone likes to use that line, but actually using that as your everyday rule or your everyday, I don't want to say affirmation, but just treating yourself also with that kindness is what I also like to approach. I don't know if I answered your question.
Just keep talking.
You're saying,
I love it.
Well, and you said you read this book 20 years ago, and I only read this book a couple of months ago.
Well, I'm also twice your age, so so I'm not ahead of you. I was just in a different formation of books.
I think it's one of those books that I definitely want to pick up again, and I'll connect to it in a different way. That I think being brought up as in this society of having to dress the part, have the new technology, all those different things, it allowed me to say, I don't want to be a part of that anymore. I don't want it to all be about how I look or my personality. Even today coming on your show, I thought I could wear a pretty dress, and then I thought, why? Why? Jessie wants to talk to my soul and my brain, not what I'm wearing here. And even though we joked about, oh, shoes, are you going to wear those shoes or not? Okay, well, as a yoga teacher, I never get to wear high heels, so it's an excuse to do that. And I don't even think I could reach the floor with my barefoot. Even when I go on the TTC, I'm like this. So, so I got to a point where I had to ask myself, like, who are you representing today? You need to represent yourself as Sarah, not as the musician, not as always the yoga teacher, but just yourself. Because that's, I think, how I connect with people is just being myself.
Absolutely.
And that's how we connected.
Absolutely. It was. It's really delightful to see somebody in their true self, because you can feel their heart, and you can see how they carry themselves in the world. And while I realize it's not about how you carry yourself in the world, but you get a sense of who they are, their integrity, their realness, their authenticity. And yeah, and I think far too often we're schooled to present ourselves in a certain way. And trust me, I began shedding that coat about 20 years ago. My sisters would tell you it was longer than that, but yeah, my partner calls me the irreverent reverend, and he calls me, he says I'm savage about things, because I'll say whatever comes into my mind. If I think it's funny and not harmful, I just say it.
Right.
And because I love to make people laugh, and I love to startle them, because I like to get them thinking about it. Now sometimes they'll just, you know, end up being offended, and then I have to apologize, but that's not my intention. My intention is I'm just being me, and I'm inviting you to be you. Mm-hmm. And that's a part of what this show is about, because I want people to see who the holistic entrepreneurs are in our community, and the kind of books they can read, you know, to hold maybe not the same perspective, but the same idea of life that we hold, and also to get people reading. So.
Yes, and to sit down and just, you know, get away from the phone, get away from our social media, and focus on the book. And I have an e-reader, and I keep thinking I'm going to load the e-reader. What do I spend my time doing? Going down to Bell Book and Candle, or even online sometimes, and just ordering tons of books. And I'm probably close to, not 200 yet, but maybe close to 100. Yeah. And that part that you said, you know, you're trying not to offend someone. A friend that we have in common taught me something, Vanessa Marie Dewsbury. She asked me, she reminded me that when you start to feel like, oh, did I offend that person, to ask yourself, is this my energy or is this their energy? So if they took offense to that, then I have to remind myself, it wasn't what you said, it's how they interpret it, or right. Maybe someone else said something like that to them, similar at a different time in their life. So that's why they're holding on to that. So I always ask myself that, is this my energy or is this their energy? And I have so many people in my community that I can learn from, that teach me so much, and I just want to continue to learn from everyone, and hopefully do the same, be able to teach other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's what I call witnessing, is the closer to ourselves we become, and the more we live that in our lives and in the world, we're merely showing people how wonderful it is to be true to yourself and to let go of all the things that are holding you back from being who you are.
One of the things I find challenging, though, is when I get excited about something, and even this book, as I said, I'm probably going to have to reread it 5 times to appreciate it at a different point in my life, is when I get excited, I want to tell my best friend about it, and I want to tell my parents about it, or I want to tell, you know, my sibling about it. And then you have to realize that everyone has to learn it on their own pace and be ready for it.
Yeah.
And come to it at their own time. So even with my journey with yoga, and I noticed, you know, different with my meditation, different things shifting. And I was so excited to tell someone about, like, oh, you know, when I have that belly ache in my stomach, that's actually that's my manipura, that's my solar plexus chakra. And I would share that with people, and people weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
So I remind myself, as much as I get excited about a new book or something I'm learning, that I may have to just hold back a little bit and wait for someone to learn it at their own time.
Yeah.
I'm happy to share parts that I've learned if they're open to it, but not pushing it on someone. And sometimes I find that challenging. So I'm looking for that community where I can share and they can say, yeah, I read that book. So we need to have a book club.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mentioned in my last interview that I have something coming in the new year that I'm starting.
Perfect.
And it doesn't center around books, but it will involve the messages from a lot of the books that I've read and that I know others are reading. So, yeah, so it's coming.
It's coming. Okay, great. I'll be quiet about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it off camera.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry. I'm just...
Let's both do that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. So, is there another part of the book that gave you something?
There's another chapter. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd really like people to understand that when we're talking about self-help books, it isn't that we think or that everybody thinks that they need to change. I think what it is that when it opens you up and brightens your eyes and makes your heart sing, and you realize that there's a new way of being, if it resonates for you, then that's exciting, and that's really what I think the purpose of of this show and books are, is to just invite people to expand a little.
I like learning from other people.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, and I've been living with it for about 2 years, and it's not related to the book, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I always ask myself, who am I surrounding myself with? Who can I learn from? And that's why I continue to pick up these books. And a lot of friends will be like, hey, do you have any mystery novels? I'm like, I don't remember the last time I read a mystery novel. And no disrespect to that, but I prefer to learn as I read. And maybe that's a fault. Maybe that's actually something I need to work on, is not always having to learn, but I have this urge to learn more. And to learn about myself too, how I relate to it or how I can benefit from it. So that's something I enjoy for reading, is that, you know, what can I learn from this, or what can I learn from my community, the people I'm spending time with. And I think you mentioned this before, is that when you have tons of books, so sometimes I just pick it up and read a chapter. And for me, wanting to share books with other people, they might not have or schedule the time in to read that book. They just might have their priorities different. That's okay. But even for some friends and family, I could say, here, read this chapter, and you'd relate to it. So you can even pick up this book and say, go to the table of contents, and I'm going to read this. And one of the ones that stood out to me was the chapter on addiction. And we all have different forms of addiction. Maybe my addiction is, you know, 12 o'clock at night being on Lululemon website, online shopping, because I know it's so easy and it can come to my door, and then I give myself the excuse, well, I'm a yoga teacher, so it's okay, I'll write it off. I'll write it off. But how many pairs of Lululemons do you really need, Sarah? So that's my own form of addiction, and I'm working on it. But the thing about addiction is it's human nature to judge first. Be like, so-and-so has that addiction to, whether it's alcoholism, or maybe it is shopping, or maybe it is TV, whatever that addiction is. And we always come from that place, and I think it's just human nature to judge and to react. And this chapter kind of changed that for me. And this one paragraph I'm going to share, it's, you know, chapter 10, called Addiction, is the recognition of your own addictions requires inner work. It requires that you look clearly at the places where you lose power in your life, so relating back to that form of power, where you are controlled by external circumstances. It requires going through your defenses, even when striving for clarity, or when outer circumstances such as injury caused by driving drunk, or a marriage wrecked by promiscuity, provide evidence of an addiction. The personality often clings to a perception of its addiction as a mere problem. Initially as a small problem, and then as a bigger problem, and then as a significant problem. Why does the personality resist acknowledging its addictions? So acknowledging an addiction, accepting that you have an addiction, is acknowledgement that a part of you is out of control. So that really resonated with me. You know, and we can judge our friends, we can judge our community, we can judge even our family, but then they have to do the work themselves. Even myself, joking about that, about shopping or whatever, I have to do that work myself. Why am I addicted to X? What control is it really giving me? And where do I feel like I'm losing power? So that kind of really opened it up. Instead of judging right away and being like, so-and-so has this problem, no, why do they have that problem? But they have to figure it out on their own. And learning that about myself too. If I tend to lean on chocolate, and as much as I'm joking about it, no, I do. I eat chocolate every single day. I'll admit to that. If I tend to lean on something, why? Why am I leaning on that right now? Maybe it's not something for the remainder of my life, but that period of my life, why am I leaning on that? What loss of power have I had? Or am I at? Yeah.
You know, I'm going to confess right now that you've just given me some really good information, because I quit smoking for 24.5 years, and last Christmas I picked up a cigarette in a crisis situation, and I've been smoking ever since. I've quit twice. I even made it to 2 weeks and right back, and I just realized that I'm giving myself the excuse that it's an addiction and I am controlled by the power of that addiction to, you know, nicotine or whatever. But really, I think I'm just giving myself permission to do it.
Right.
Darn.
Well, I didn't say that. Gary did. So well, I just brought it to as a reminder of that. Yeah, that connection. That we are also hard on ourselves, though. So, you know, we're allowed to slip once in a while. It's okay.
Well, yeah, like I don't expect myself to be perfect in any way, but it really has. It has been very disappointing to me, and I know my partner, God bless him, he never He never says anything until something will happen and he'll say, well, if you quit smoking, you could do this. And then he doesn't say anything else. So he's been great. My daughter, on the other hand, lambastes me every time she sees me.
And it's easy for us to do that, though. It's easier for us to do, if you do this, it will equal to this. Even some of my friends that I've opened up to about my own experience in the past with anxiety, and now are coming to me and saying, like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to go talk to someone. I said, great, like, I really think you should. And I just so you know, this also worked for me. At first, I wanted to be like, oh, well, you can't just go talk to someone because you need to do this, this, and this, and this, and this to also make, you know, to help yourself. But I realized I had to pull back and say, no, they need to figure that out on their own. And instead I can say, this worked for me. So your daughter or your partner saying, well, you need to try this. We all need to kind of take a step back and be like, this worked for me, this might not work for Jessie.
Yeah.
Or she needs to figure out what's going to work for her. And even myself, sometimes we want to help. And we get to that point, especially in the type of job that you have, and as my role as a yoga teacher, we always want to help, and then yet at the same time, we need to step back a little bit and be like, okay, so this worked for me, but it might not work for so-and-so, and that's kind of how I'm looking at certain situations now as well.
Yeah.
So I hope that gave you a little, to be less hard on yourself.
Well, yeah, I try not to be too hard on myself about it, but you know what? I have been so involved in listening to what you said. I want to hear about Anahata Yoga, your studio. Where is it? And you just started it, right?
Just started it. It's a quite exciting time, terrifying time, as you know, starting your own business. And previously, a lot of people might know me in the community as Sarah the musician, the singer first, and I've branched out now into yoga. And it's a new passion for me, but something I absolutely love. And I, as you said in my bio, I like to combine the two. So at the end of the class, I might sing a song or a line from a song. But it's a new studio called Anahata in the south end of Barrie, off of Mapleview and Essa area.
Oh, yeah.
And really, the space idea came about after I shared with actually my mom, who's an entrepreneur in Barrie as well. And I shared with her about 4 years ago as I was going through my own anxiety and depression. And I'm finally at the place where I'm comfortable sharing that I went through that. At the time I went through that, I was like, no, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about that. No one wanted to admit that they are going through this. So at that time I said to my mom, I said, I love yoga. It's helping me so much. I'll go to the gym, I'll eat right, I'll do all these things I'm supposed to do to help with anxiety or help me get through my depression, but the one thing that keeps working is yoga.
Yeah.
And that's how I became a yoga teacher. I wanted to help myself.
Yeah, well, that's super.
Yeah.
I'm sorry we're out of time. No, I just wanted to make sure that I thanked you for coming, and I just want to thank my viewers for dropping into Epiphanies, and today we've enjoyed The Seat of the Soul by Gary Sukav, and talking with Sarah Melody of Anahata Yoga in the south end of Barrie. And I so appreciate you taking the time to come and hear a little bit about both of those things. Thank you for joining us on Epiphanies. Have a great day.
In Touch